Welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Nishit Acharya. Nish, welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me, Nitin. Looking forward to it.
Likewise, let's start with who is Nish?
I'm Indian American, born and raised in the United States in Wisconsin. Grew up in the Boston area, where I currently reside. I'm a husband and a father of two boys. Big fan of all sports related to Boston, and I've spent my career in a variety of areas, from politics to philanthropy to government, and really enjoy new challenges and learning more about the world.
I found that really fascinating about you. You've been all around the place. And so to me, the first question, as an extension of who Nish is what gets you out of bed? What excites you? What motivates you? What inspires you?
Well, it's probably I'm forced out of bed by my children. That's the first thing. But I think it's really always been two things that have excited me. One is the scope of things that the world still needs to get done to be a better place. And whether that's, a policy issue like climate change, or whether it's, being a good neighbor and being in your community, or being a good, family person. There's a lot that the world still needs, and getting up and working on those things is really exciting. And then I think the second thing that's always driven me is the love of learning and the love of exploration, and the idea that even though I've been able to travel a lot, there's still a whole world out there to see and to visit, to learn about, a whole lot of topics to learn about. And I think that constantly keeps me engaged, it keeps me excited. And I've tried to build my life around those opportunities to the best that I can. And I think to the best, obviously, we all have responsibilities. And so, to the best that I can, I try to keep those two things very center to everything I do. Sort of new learning, and what are the big challenges that I can be helpful on.
Well, I love that with so much to do, you're still being forced out of bed. That's the best part.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
I love to understand things through the lens of impact. And I would love to hear from you the impact you and your teams as you have moved across
Mhm.
careers and goals. What is that big number? What is that impact that you've been able to create?
So that's a great question. I think in the roles I've been in, I've been able to mostly facilitate the impact that others have been involved with. So I feel like the activities I've been involved with over the course of my career have affected millions of people in a positive way. So I'm comfortable saying that. I'm also very comfortable in, that there are other people doing most of the work to achieve that change. But I think that's a role we play in our lives. Some of us are, have different roles, and we leverage what we can do. I don't live in a village in India, and so I can't necessarily do the work directly there, but I can raise money and things like that in the United States to support their work. So I would say definitely millions. And I think, I define impact as, improving the situation even just a little bit better than it was. And so in that way, there's a lot of ways we can have impact. We can have impact in our community, coaching soccer and basketball. We can have impact politically by, volunteering for campaigns. I think for me, it's been, a little bit of what we talked about earlier. I think it's been looking at what are the big impact opportunities in the world. So I've been blessed to have a career where I've gotten to know a lot of important people, successful people. And so I think for me, it's not just about, can I volunteer on a campaign? It's about, how are we going to influence the candidates? How are we going to influence the policymakers on the important issues of the day? And how are we going to find the right answers to do that? So that's something I view as impact. I also think putting in the time to build new programs and try things that people haven't tried before, whether that's, we talked a little bit about Akshaya Patra and bringing it to the United States, or when I was in the Obama administration, launching new programs for startups and entrepreneurs. These were all things where I think the impact came in much later after I had stopped being involved to a certain extent, but sowing the seeds for some new big ideas that could be really relevant and important down the line, I think is the other way that I think of impact as being an important thing to work on.
And I agree with your definition. And this might sound naive, but I love to ask the question anyways,
Mhm.
is why do this? I mean, you could take your time, your effort, your passion to
Hmm.
do so many other things that are considered by many as maybe more impactful for self, make money, for example.
Hmm.
Why do these things? Why is community? Why is making other people's lives better important for you?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of people along the way who've said, why haven't you taken a more wealth building path, if you will? I think one of the things we're fortunate about, particularly in the United States, is that you can have a very successful career, professionally, financially, and live well. Not wealthy, but live well in nice communities and a nice living in the nonprofit, university, and government sectors. And so I think that's made it a lot easier. I don't think that's the case in many countries where it's still very old fashioned and the idea is that you have to take a vow of poverty or save or these sorts of things. I think in the United States, it's very professional. And that's been a big part of my being able to do that. I think the other thing is just almost DNA. I don't know if there's a choice. I think I've always felt like, there's a problem to work on or there's a challenge. I feel the need to work on it. One of the things early on I realized was my father went to the, IIT Kharagpur and came over here, and I grew up in a nice suburb here in the Boston area where I still live, same suburb actually, and had a very nice upbringing. And I compare that to my cousins in India who were also middle class. They were perfectly fine, but during visits you see the stark contrast in
Mhm.
opportunity, right, and not in intelligence. There was no contrast in intelligence. There was contrast in opportunity. That really drove me from an early age to think about, well, how do we create those opportunities for others who have the intelligence or have the energy and the ideas? What are we going to do to make this more of a level playing field as a planet? And I think that's always driven me more than anything else. Also, I got involved in politics early on, and that's a very competitive sport, if you will. And people don't think of it that way, but it's very much like a startup. You're competing fiercely until the day you run out of money, and that's the election day, and then you're trying to win, right? And so I think the combination of how do we make the world a better place, plus this intense competitiveness of politics, really sort of put me on the path I'm on, and how I measure these things.
Love that. Now, as you go across and have this mindset of abundance, I'm curious to know what's the one big challenge you're facing?
I think the biggest challenge is knowing that we have finite resources and time on this planet. And there's some things that you must take care of, like your family and responsibilities. And then there's time to, make the world a better place. And I think the limiting time and the issues that go with that, like figuring out what you're going to focus that time on and what's the right use of your skills and time and energy. I think that's the biggest issue I always struggle with and think about is okay, and I'm 50 years old now. Let's say I have 30 years to be productive, hopefully more, but let's say at least 30 years. What is that? What can I do in that time period? Even make it smaller, even make it 5 years, make it a year. What should I be spending my time on, and will that be effective? Will it be impactful? That's really the always the big question that I sort of think about.
And as you think about that, on the flip side of challenges come opportunities. What's the one that's most exciting? And you're kind of looking at it and saying, this is really something I want to drive.
Yeah, I think the last several years, particularly the last decade or so, my professional focus has very much been around innovation for the broader global good. And so I run an organization called Equal Innovation, and that's our mission is to help entrepreneurs in areas like climate change, global health, education. And that actually excites me. That really gets me up in the morning because when you think about climate change, recycling is important. Building a seawall in LA or Boston or Mumbai is going to be important, but it's really going to be scientific, technological innovation matched with really good public policy that's going to help us figure out how to address rising sea levels or drought in India and extreme heat. And so that really excites me to see what people are working on and motivates me to say we have to do this now, right? And I think I may have been telling you this story earlier, but during COVID, the way a lot of the world mobilized around a vaccine and said, we need an innovative vaccine that works and we need it quickly and we need to scale it and make it available. I think it showed the potential for the world to take new ideas, new technology, and make them ubiquitous and make it fast. And so when we want to as a planet, we can. And I think that's what really excites me right now. You see the same thing in healthcare,
Mhm.
with the innovations in genetics and things. You see it in climate with batteries. So I think just seeing the scale and scope of interesting scientific breakthroughs people are coming up with and saying, you know what, we have really good, not solutions always, but certainly we have really good ways to address all of the problems we talk about. How do we start to focus and do that? And I think that's how I think about it right now.
And I agree with that. And it's almost like when we need to, we figure out a way. But how do we do
Yes.
that on things where we want to, but we just can't get together because of many other things that come in the way? So,
Yeah, and that's where I've learned with age that, change comes very slowly. When I was starting out in my career, I remember, a fleeting moment when I thought, oh, we can solve all these problems. We have plenty of time, certainly over the next 40 years. And I've sadly come to realize that that's not the case no matter what, no matter who you are and how much money and resources you have, that's not the case. Just ask Bill Gates. He's been working on the same
mhm,
problems for 30 years now.
true.
Excuse me. I think the fact that we now I've learned that these things take time. I think on an issue like climate change, we've seen it go now where most people believe it's a real thing, but aren't quite sure how to deal with it. And most people still don't necessarily, even if they believe in it, don't see the connection directly with their own lives unless they happen to live in a place where there's an issue. And so I think these things take time, and the question is, how do you slowly, quickly, more quickly than how do you push people along? It's going to happen slowly, but how do you increase the pace a little bit, and how do you get to a place where you're making that impact that you want to be? I'll share one example where it's gone somewhat slowly, but then speeded up was U.S. India relations, which is something I've worked on for a long time. And in the 90s, when I started, it was really just a few people in a room. And now it's viewed as one of the most important relationships in the world. And so there took a long time, slow, 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 and then when it picked up, it's become very important. So I think figuring out that for everything is really going to be critical.
True, I agree. In terms of the startup world, we talk about the 10-year overnight success. So some of these might be more like 20, 25-year overnight successes. But I'm glad that you are working on those, and we have the right minds and right people that are driving these changes that are going to be definitive for generations to come. Now, as we look forward, I am curious to pause and reflect and ask you to share two moments in your life and career. One where things did not work out as you had expected, and there was failure, there were lessons, and another where things exceeded your expectations and became a success beyond your imagination.
Those are great questions. So I think the failure I always point to was my first job as CEO was for a state-funded nonprofit here in Massachusetts in the Boston area that developed an entrepreneurship and tech curriculum for high schools. And it was a perfect storm, as they say. I was a first-time CEO. I wasn't even 30 yet. As soon as I joined, we were zeroed out of the state budget. So we lost about 80% of our funding. Happy day one for me. And we had a board of directors that was dysfunctional. And, I spent the year trying to fix things and get the group back in place. And we did our best, and we did stabilize things, but not enough to continue. And I think that was it was a failure at the time. I thought, oh my God, this is a failure. We've let the children down, we've let the organization and donors down, we've let the states down. And personally, I thought maybe I don't have what it takes to do this. And in my next opportunities, I really took the lessons to heart of that failure. Why did we lose our funding? Why was the board dysfunctional? How do you manage people? And I don't think all of a sudden I became perfect at it, but I think I constantly looked at that failure experience and said, what does a successful organization need to be, and how do we build on that? So I've carried those lessons of that failure with me for 20 years now, and always thought, that situation was the opposite of how we want to support, organizations or initiatives in our life, and what can I do to make sure that that situation doesn't occur for other people if I'm involved with the group, from a board or whether perspective. So that's the lesson learned failure that I learned a lot from. The success, while successful beyond my imagination, would definitely be the Akshaya Patra and bringing it to the United States. And so, for your listeners who don't know, Akshaya Patra is a school lunch program in India based out of Bangalore that now feeds well over 2 million kids a day. And so that's over, a billion meals a year that they're cooking and distributing. And when we, I think it was 2006 or seven, decided to bring and said, hey, let's open a US office. I was with the Deshpande Foundation at the time, and we said, let's fund their US office. There's NRIs, there's Indian Americans who have deep ties who will want to support, who doesn't want to support school feeding, right? So it would be people who want to support that. And then American companies all have Bangalore offices, we can reach them. I did not know that it would be as it was the first time, other than Pratham, that anybody had a US office. The first time one had been set up this way. Pratham was more organic. And in the first year, we raised $2 million from Indian Americans and also from Fidelity Investments, which is about as, sort of blue chip, American old fashioned company. And here they were giving for a school lunch program for government schools in India. And I think that was stunningly successful. We also were featured at the Clinton Global Initiative, and President Clinton later visited Akshaya Patra. And so, I think that was when you see the program, as I know you have, it's not surprising that they're successful. But when it's never been done before, and the moment where you say, wow, everybody else sees the same thing that I do or we do in the case of the Deshpandes, that's a really powerful moment where you just are amazed that you made the right choice to invest in this, even though it was the first time. And then Akshay Patra has gone on to grow both as an organization in India as well as their U.S. operations, and so that's been far more successful than I ever imagined.
And again, what a beautiful way to be able to impact so many lives at that stage. So you're really not just impacting a life, but a generation. So,
Exactly, exactly. And to be a small part of that, simply because we were here in between the Deshpandes and my political background had some connections we could leverage. It really, I think more than anything, it put it on the map as a legitimate, good program. And for many people, that was all they needed to unlock their support. And so, just incredibly successful beyond our wildest expectations.
well, congratulations to you, and of course to Desh and the rest of the
Mhm.
family that has been supporting this and continues to. Uh,
Yes.
Now, just to kind of switch gears, I would love to hear amongst the many things that you do that bring pleasure and joy, not to the people involved, but also to you. What do you do to kick back, relax, de stress, and just kind of, wind down, if you will?
Well, it's interesting. I really love my work, so I never feel like I have to disconnect and kick back. But when I do, my favorite activity is definitely spending time with my family, particularly my two boys, 17 and 13. And so whatever is the activity with them, I've coached them in soccer, I've coached them in other sports. There's activities we do together. So that's definitely my favorite activity. It's de-stressing most of the time. Sometimes it's more stressful, but as all kids are. But I think spending family time is something that's quite important to me. I also I'm an active runner, so I've done some half marathons. It's my way of de-stressing. It's my way of going out and thinking through different problems and things like that. So I really enjoy the running part of my career. And then I had different activities over the years. Whether it's travel in addition to my work travel, adding on some time to sort of cultural and historic significance places around the world. I took up scuba diving a few years ago
Nice.
and skiing just again as a way as part of my, how do I explore the world? What do I see? And so that's been really joyous to be able to do that as well. So I try to do different things, but I also do enjoy my work. So
That's amazing. Now, any book or a podcast that you would like to recommend and share?
So on the book side, I actually really enjoyed the rock star Bono, his book Surrender, because I've been a U2 fan my whole life and
Mhm.
listened to their music. And I'm 50 years old, so their career as a rock band has
Yeah.
mapped mine. And
Mhm.
you see that a lot at their concerts. Everybody's certain age group I'm sure it was the same with the Rolling Stones and others.
Hmm.
And so reading his story and the meaning for the songs and the experience, I think personally was really, really, important for me. And it's been a great read too, to know what they were doing while I was rocking out to their songs or standing, in the stadium where they were playing. So that book has really been great. In terms of podcasts, I'll share two that I don't miss. One is Bill Simmons, who is a sports columnist originally from Boston, who does several sports podcasts, but his I really enjoy because they're a little bit irreverent but good insights. And then the other, which is more sort of thoughtful, is the Adam Grant
Hmm.
podcast. Oh, actually, for this audience, I would say not Adam Grant. He's a great, but Milind Vaishnav's Carnegie Endowment podcast,
Hmm.
Grand Tamasha. I think he just has great set of speakers and authors and political leaders talking about Indian politics and Indian society. And so I never miss an episode of Millen's a podcast as well.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing those. Now, on to my favorite part of the show. We call it the one line life lessons.
Mhm.
Ish, would love for you to share your life lessons with us.
Okay. So I would start with relationships matter the most. And I found in my life that showing up is the biggest thing you can do, whether it's family, friends, work. So relationships matter the most and they stay with you for a long, long time. That's been my biggest life lesson, I think, as I've gotten older, to invest in those. So relationships matter most. I would say the second one is to be humble. That's something, interestingly enough, as I've gotten older, I think I've become more humble. I think as you're younger, you think you either know it all or the answer is obvious. And I think as you get older, you learn things and you learn how hard it is to make the kind of change we've been talking about here. And so I think being humble is an important trait to have, and not assuming you know what'll happen. I think the third thing is that our integrity is all that we really have. The money, the homes, the media appear, all that stuff is only with us, in fleeting time and place. But our integrity, particularly when you match it up with the relationships and other things, is really all that we have. And so maintaining our integrity and our word and all that is critical. That would be the third one I think I've found most important. The other two are more, I think, I found it's important to try different things in life. Someone said to me that, the values created at the intersection of different disciplines. I don't know if that's a real quote or just somebody said it to me, and I found that to be certainly true, that trying different things, whether it's scuba diving or skiing alongside, media and politics and philanthropy, I think you just spend your life that way learning a lot of different things. And for people who can't switch as radically as I have, certainly within their organizations, doing different things is, I think, keeps you fresh, it keeps you engaged, it keeps you looking, it opens up doors that you didn't know existed and hadn't thought about. So I think trying new things would be the fourth one. And then for me, the fifth is to take calculated risks. And I think all three words in that are important. So take the risks. I think calculated is important because you can't risk everything. I think, making sure your family and health and all is taken care of is very important for the long term. And then risks, things where maybe there is some potential loss if it doesn't work out, but the opportunity if it does is 5x what you're currently doing. I think those calculated risks are really worth taking. So in my career, I think it almost feels like some are rooted in like be a good person, be who you are, and then a little bit of the within that context, take the risk you can.
Love it, Nish. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story, and your life lessons, but most importantly, for being who you are and being a positive change in our community. Please continue to do what you do and bring more impact, more positivity to everyone around you. We wish you all the best and congratulations again on all of your successes.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you for having me on the show.